Really appreciate everybody joining us today. Uh, these monthly events, we hold them not every Wednesday, that would be a lot. We hold them on the last Wednesday of each month through October. I'm Candace Shibley. I'm with the State Division of Water Resources, and I'm really happy to be a part of the team that helps organize these events and brings them to you each month. Again, as we're getting started, feel free to use that chat box and let us know where you're joining from. It's always fun to see how far the reach is. Just some quick background as to why we do these monthly events. We started this series last April with the goal of supporting folks that are participating in the Landscape Incentive Program, which offers up to $3 per square foot for replacing lawn with water efficient landscaping. That price point and eligibility does vary by location. If you are planning to participate in that program, do not kill your lawn before you apply. That is a very important step in that process. We do need to verify that there's lawn in the project area before you get started. If you have any questions about the program or want to check eligibility, the slowtheflow.org website is a great place to get started. So this month, I'm excited. We have Shane Richards joining us. He is the landscape operations manager at Utah State University, and he's done a lot of work to reduce the water use on campus while keeping it looking really great. And as we're all experiencing a drought and looking for ways to improve how we use water in our landscape, I'm really excited to hear about some of the things that Shane has been doing and what we can do ourselves. But before we get started, I'm going to turn the time over to our landscape experts. We have Casey and Ryan joining us today to lead our maintenance minute, just sharing some tips and tricks on what to watch for between now and our June event. Casey is a landscape pro with Central Utah Water Conservancy District located in Orem, and Ryan runs the beautiful Red Hills Desert Garden down in St. George. So between the two of them, we have our very geographically diverse states pretty well covered. So Casey, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. And then, of course, sharing the screen is always the tricky part, right?
No pressure.
I'm trying to find that right screen. Do we get it?
It is, it is up.
Oh, we didn't get the right screen though, huh?
We're on the notes slide.
We're on the right slide, just not the. Oh, it's okay. We'll just go with this real fast because I don't want to take up too much time. Um, just picked four things to quickly talk about. One is to verify your sprinklers and drip are working properly, and hopefully you've probably already turned on your sprinklers, and so hopefully you've already done this. We have a property down in Springville that we just turned the water on, and all these pictures have my finger or hand in there somewhere. These are action items, but this was a sprinkler that was malfunctioning at our site. It was going way too fast. You can see the water pooling right there. So if I hadn't gone and checked that, I wouldn't have known after we turned the water on. And then we also had a drip zone that we noticed a few days after we had just turned the water on that got stuck on after it had actually watered. And so we prevented that from flooding just by being there and checking and making sure. And so we caught that. So make sure that you're doing that, and then being aware of watering restrictions. Is that popping up okay? You're seeing the right slide?
Yeah, yep, it transitioned just fine.
Okay. Okay. um, just whether you have a smart controller or not, you need to check with your city, make sure you understand what the watering restrictions are, and may need to adjust that even with a smart controller so that it doesn't water on the days you're not allowed to. Not every city has those watering restrictions, but very important to verify and make sure you understand so you don't water on a day you're not supposed to. And then as we look into June, next few weeks here, we're going to be looking at raising our mower height to maybe 2.5 to 3 inches is what I've seen recommended. And that's kind of what I tend to do. And so that may be if you have like 7 notches on your lawnmower, it may be like number five. I think it is on mine, somewhere around there. Just depends. Some of the lawnmowers will tell you on there what the increment is, so you will know exactly, but some of them don't. So we just like to raise that mower height as things heat up to cool our grass, keep it cooler and dry out less frequently because we've got more shade in there. And then the last one, just I've already gone through and weeded like crazy because the spring is when the weeds are the worst. But now it's time to go back and catch those ones, the latecomers, and get those that are popping up in the mulch like that. So those are my tips for northern Utah, and I will turn the time back over to Candace and Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. Those are some great tips. Uh,
I guess you need me to stop sharing here.
no, you're good. I have the power to just take over. All right. Are you seeing that okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect.
Um, so everything Casey said would also apply here. So down here in southern Utah. Um, so yeah, along with the weeding, so most of our spring weeding should be done at this point. So it's really not too bad through the summer months. It's very dry, not a lot's going to germinate, but still keep an eye out for puncture vines, spurge in your lawns, or right around the base of your plants. And Russian thistle tends to start germinating this time of year. Um, Most of our perennials, they're kind of winding down on their spring bloom season. This is when the trees really start to shine, things like the desert willows, the palo verdes. So I like to wait on things like penstemons and desert marigolds to deadhead them until the seeds are mature. Really, the way to tell is wait until the penstemon, the little pod, has split open. When that is open, it's time to deadhead. And then I like to shake the seeds out on the ground, or I'll put them in a bag. Because I find with a lot of those desert wildflowers, though they grow a lot better when they just germinate where they want to be rather than trying to force them into a specific spot. So it's a good time to collect the seed. As far as the irrigation for the month of June, this is kind of a transition month. We're kind of ending spring, and it's very possible we'll get our first major heat wave where we're well over 105 by the end of the month. We'll see. And so, we're right now you're probably doing about 2 times a week on your lawn. By the end of the month, it'll probably be an every other day kind of schedule. Um, if you are taking care of your lawn appropriately, you should never need to water more than every other day, even in Washington County. It's a lot of people are convinced they've got to water every day, and if that's the case, you've got some other maintenance practices that need to be improved. Trees and shrubs, just try to avoid the daily sip of water. You should have been training them to have a deeper root, which means you're watering less frequently, but a much longer run time, an hour or more potentially. And that is really what helps to build their resilience in as the hot temperatures start to arrive. As far as planting, we're kind of at the end of the planting season. If you can wait, I'd wait until fall at this point. And I mean, technically you can plant anytime, but you're going to have to really baby anything you put in the ground now. And then avoid any major pruning projects unless there's dead wood you're taking out. Since we're just about to hit the real hot period, we want to do as little pruning as we can. That will just add extra stress to the plants. So that's all I've got from St. George.
Awesome. Thank you both. That was super informative. Appreciate that. Okay. We will make sure we leave plenty of time for questions at the end. As always, feel free to ask them throughout the event, but if you guys could use the Q&A box for me, if you can see that, that just helps me stay organized. If it's easy for you on your device to use the chat, that's fine too. I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. Okay, so Shane, I'm so glad you're able to join us today. You've managed the landscapes at USU for 10 years, and from what I hear, you found some really creative and interesting ways to reduce water use, often by 25 to 50% without sacrificing the health of the landscape or the appearance of campus. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what some of those extra things are that I can be doing in my landscape, and I'm excited to learn from you today.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, sound great.
Alright. Just so I know Candace can. Everybody else, give me like a thumbs up if there's anything. If everybody can hear me, that's not Candace. There we go. Got one. We'll count it as a go. Okay. So mine enjoy the landscape and save the water. But I'm gonna talk a little bit because she mentioned that we saved. We're pretty good up here and I represent the northern part of the state. So all three of us we have one in southern Utah, one in the middle of Utah, and then me up here in Logan area. Um, we About 4 or 5 years ago, we had that first drought, about 2021. We went ahead and we kind of made some steps. We saved about 40% of our water. And our goal was to save water without disrupting the landscape. And so a lot of the stuff I'm sharing here is kind of based on what we know, what we learned, and what we did. And it's 5 principles really that I'll talk about that will save water and help. Um, and we know our goal is actually like now that we have a drought year this year, we're looking at about a 60% savings is what we're trying to do, again, without affecting the landscape too much. We may or may not be able to do it, but we have a goal set for it. Um, so there's going to be 5 principles that I do as soon as I figure out how to move my screen. So this is my campus. This is the Logan landscape behind it, the quad, the trees. So this is the kind of stuff that my day to day is just maintaining this. A little bit about me, just in case, just to know my experience. Um, for the past 10 years, I've been the landscape operation and maintenance manager for Utah State University. I've had my own company that's been in various forms because it's always been the side job. I think a lot of people know how that is, but Richards Landscapes has ran for about 32 years. And there's 10 years of it, which is pure turf care. I had 4 years where I was just an arborist. Um, Loved like taking big trees down over in small lots, like over a house was just kind of fun. And then I did a lot of high-end landscapes and installations and some of that stuff. I was a park manager. I've been a floral shop owner. I managed some large fertilizing companies, some industrial complexes, and also worked for Utah State Extension for a little while. This is my education. So I have an interdisciplinary study actually. I couldn't quite decide what I wanted to do, so we did soil science, plant science, then a minor in business, and then I have a horticulture, and then I have a couple certificates. Like I have a sports turf management certificate from Ohio State University. I've had a pesticide applicator license since I was a young person. Backflow testing, playground inspector, ISA. This is a lot of city stuff that I was doing there. So this we're going to talk about the presentation, the 5 water-wise steps. I'm going to talk about the proper landscape construction because you can solve a lot of water issues by taking the first steps to make sure you've done the correct landscaping. And almost all that is about compaction and soil. And then we're going to talk about maintenance on the irrigation, proper plants, the compaction in case you moved into a house or you didn't get that proper landscape construction done correctly. Some of the things we can do there. And then I'm going to share with you probably one pro tip. I said tricks, but one pro tip is probably better. And kind of talk about that one a bit. It's one that is very helpful, especially when we're in a drought condition. And then there's a lot of pro tips. We can actually answer a lot of questions after that, um, a lot that you guys have. So the proper landscape construction, I'm going to go right to this picture. So this is one of my favorites because this is in Tooele, and this is showing our property. And now, if you look at it, we got these green and the yellow. And I don't know if I have my chat box open, but does somebody want to guess why it's colored this way? Just throw it out in the chat and see if anybody has an idea. And then I got to pull up my chat box.
Do you want me to?
Fertilizer, sprinkler lines. I can see them here. Fertilizer overlap, window reflection. Okay, good guess. We got it. We got one that's got it right. Oh, I like it. Now I can't keep up with all of them. But I like a couple things. As one said, window glare. That actually, like on our artificial turf field for playing football, the window glare has melted some of our plastic. It's off the field, but off of the field, we actually have some areas where it's actually melted. And it has to do it over 210 degrees before it can melt it. So we have some window reflection that actually does heat up some areas 200 degrees. This one is irrigation lines. So here's the story about this one. They came in and we have 12 inches of topsoil that has to be brought in. And that's kind of our USU standard is they'll bring in 12 inches of topsoil and put it in, and it's got to be a good pH. It's got to be a great soil structure, a certain amount of sand. We won't allow over 30% of clay. We have some good standards that the soil has to meet. And the soil met it. This was great soil. But then what they did is they came in, they brought it in, they rolled it down, and then they compacted it. I think one of the last ones here, Ryan has it down, is there was a lot of compaction because they're just trying to get it smoothed out. They didn't know how compacted it was. And then they came in and trenched the irrigation lines. So wherever the irrigation lines are at, that soil was a little bit looser. This picture was taken June 13th. We had an irrigation problem where it was broken, so the grass was starting to dry out. We repaired it and had water on the turf at June 10th. So we're still way into the summer, and everything that had that compaction is yellow. And everywhere where it had been dug up and that soil was loose, that water in the roots were able to go deep, approximately 12 inches deep, because that's where irrigation lines are at. And so when that water got turned on June 10th, this is what it looks like. Usually, if you see yellow grass like this and green grass, that's what this doesn't scare us because this is actually turf grass in recovery. So that straw yellow grass and that green is actually a good sign to us. But 3 days after we watered, everything that had the deep roots was just green and beautiful. Everything that had been compacted, even though it had great soil, was yellowed out. Um, so this is a lot of things we look for is when we are building and constructing, watch to see, make sure that your soils don't get too compacted. Um, if people actually let and this is even just in turf, it's going to be the same thing for trees and flower beds. I'll show you that one in a bit. But if we have kind of that loose soil, like a garden, everything wants to be in that garden soil. We till it up every year. So if you can have loose soil when you do the construction, most gardens aren't going to will not need to have their water turned on till about the 1st of June. I know it's pretty standard, and even up here at Utah State, as we're turning them on around that mid-April to the 1st of May, and we're lucky if we can get to mid-May. But if we learn how to manage our soils and actually keep our soils loose and keep them nice, we could go mid-May to June before we turn water on pretty much around the state. So one of the big things for water conservation is to make sure that our soils are loose when we do our landscaping. So another one, every once in a while it looks like this will freeze up on me, so let me share it again. All right. Is that all right? You guys want me to change that view? Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, I think that looks great.
So you guys will be able to see a little bit ahead of me, but this way, I think the slide buttons are going to work easier for me. So this one shows a tree. Kind of gives you an idea. If you plant a tree or any kind of shrubs, we want to make sure that those are also in a healthy, uncompacted, good soil. And this shows the top part and the bottom part. I like the illustration where it shows the tree and the roots. I guess I do want to make maybe. Um, Nope, I'm not gonna do that. Never mind. I'm gonna start messing around with things, and then I'll really mess it up. So this is what a tree will look like on that left hand or right hand side, I guess, however it looks from your point of view. When we got good soils, the tree reflects the top. I have on campus, we have about 8,000 trees, and they're mature and they're old, and everybody sees the one that's on the right, and it still looks good. It's sparse, it's got some hanging branches, it's still green and still looks nice, but the condition of it isn't near what it should be. My arborist and a lot of my group can recognize it, and then we go in and we'll actually play at the roots. We'll do a lot of digging and putting in, we do some air spading is what it's called, where we'll kind of cut it out, bring some soil into it to get the roots a little bit healthier, and that protects the tree. Trees are interesting that we will do damage for years or decades, and sometimes even kill them off 100 years early. They'll live 100 years and die 100 years early just because we haven't maintained the soil or we planted in the soil that's bad. So again, keep that soil in mind, loose and healthy for trees, for grass, for flowers, for shrubs, for all of it. So this is what most plants like. There's a couple in our desert arid areas that do want some more compacted dry soil, but most of the colorful plants we want, we're looking for something like this, where we have a good kind of mixture of air and water. It kind of goes back and forth. When we water, we might be more than 25% water. And then as it starts to dry up, we'll be more than 25% air. But we want that soil loose, where we got the mineral material at about 45 to 50%, and then we got the air and the water about 45 or 50%. Most of the time, you can't get this, but the closer you can, the better it'll be. All right, so maintaining the irrigation system. This is one that's important to us. Um, this one is a this one is, and this just kind of goes to show even coverage. A lot of times when we're watering landscapes, we're actually putting in sprinkler systems, and then we have these big brown spots on grass, or we have areas of our flower beds that are not as full and beautiful because they don't have the right amount of water. And so when we come in, we want to come in and actually do the um, make sure they're spaced appropriately so we have good coverage, because the less dry spots we have, the more we're going to be inclined to water less because everything looks good and healthy. And this just kind of illustrates it as well. There's some different type of heads, like these high efficient nozzles usually do less runoff, and they save about 30% of the water we lose to runoff and to evaporation. So using good heads help. And then of course the appropriate irrigation for the appropriate place. I love this picture just because this picture has all the, I don't know, just miles of area where it's kind of arid. They have plants in there, and all you want to do is make sure and get the water on the right spot. And this is the perfect place to use a drip line. Some places, like actually up on campus, we don't like using a drip line because we have canal water that's really dirty, and our filtration system can't quite do it. But whenever you got a place that has a good filtration system, then drip line is a great place to take care of plants. One of the things, though, if I go back, I did put in the title, maintain the irrigation system. Where people lose the most water is actually having a broken head or a broken irrigation system. And so when we say maintain the irrigation system, spend a lot of time taking care of the leaks and the little stuff. One broken head watering overnight in a turf area can use or waste as much water as watering a full week with all your irrigation heads in working order. And so a lot of times people won't audit their system. They'll go around with a broken head and they won't see that. And then they end up with this kind of situation where they have a lot of water getting lost, running down the gutter and curb that's not getting put on the landscape. This happens with all kinds of irrigation systems. So spend your time maintaining them. Go through them in the springtime, check them every week or every month, and make sure that they're healthy together. And that's going to save a lot of water in the landscapes. Proper plants. Before I go to this one, anybody have any questions about, because we can stop and actually I can answer some questions real quick on that one.
Yeah, that would be great. We actually had quite a few questions come in about the compaction. Like, what are some ways that people could reduce compaction in their landscape?
Okay, we're going to get to that one. I actually have
Okay.
two things that'll help. So that'll be pro tips. But the one is, if you have it for turf areas, it's going to be aeration. And usually I recommend a big riding machine because that'll pull plugs that are about 3 to 4 inches deep. But you can also rent just a walk around one, and that's for turf areas. For trees, we do what's called air spading. So you'd have to probably hire a professional arborist to have this kind of stuff. And what it is they just, and you can even use it, I guess, with your own air compressor. But you can blow out the soil. You don't want to cut the roots. You don't want to damage them. But you can kind of blow out the soil around roots and loosen them up. And then you can put the dirt back in. And then you get kind of a looser soil there. Flowers and shrubs, just make sure that when you're planting them, that you're digging it up and loosening it up for those. It's harder to to get that compaction out of the soil. That's why the construction is so important, is because you can actually build it, construct it, and it'll be great for years and use less water. Your plants will be healthier. Or you got to spend quite a bit on that aeration or that the soil amendments and that kind of stuff to get it back. But good question. Parking strips. I'm just reading one here. Amend the parking strips. If you've dug it out, so usually the plants I recommend 6 inches for turf, and I imagine they were switching out because we shouldn't have turf in the park strips. If you're doing shrubs, about 12 inches. If you're doing trees, 12 to 18 inches. Um, Trees, and I actually have a video kind of at the end that'll show, but trees actually grow in about the top 18 inches of your soil. They don't get much deeper. So you don't need to go too deep. And so if you can amend 6 to 18 inches, you're going to be healthy for most plants. And then I see one that says, any tips on how to give established trees the best blend of nutrients, soil, etc. How to water large. If you're just watering the large trees and nothing else, more is less and less is more, if that makes sense. Um, you're going to water a lot because the tree needs a lot, but you're going to do it a lot less often. And it depends on the maturity of the tree. So the more mature the tree is, the more water it's going to get with a longer space in between. So if it's a brand new tree, you might water every day and then every other day, and then cut it to twice a week. When you start to get a tree that's maybe 50 years old or 100 years old, you can just put a hose on that and let it drip for maybe 24 hours and do that once a month. So there's a whole lot of different ways you can water it. Um, we usually say if you're looking at the how round the tree is, one gallon of water per diameter is usually a safe bet, give or take, and that's about once a week. Doesn't mean you have to water once a week. You can go every 2 weeks. But if you have a tree that's 20 inches in diameter, it's going to probably want about 20 inches of water in a week or in 2 weeks. So trees will use still quite a bit of water, but what you get back from them is awesome because what you're getting back is that shade. You're taking the carbon out of the air, you get oxygen production, all that kind of good stuff. All right, so proper plants. I'll move on for a bit, but feel free to keep asking questions. So proper plants are important because once you get an area, this is one of my favorite landscapes on campus. This is the north side of the building, and this is young. Like it actually looks a lot better now, but this is kind of after we planted it. But we have this steep hill. We have it, it's kind of deep and recessed, so it gets a lot of water just during the spring, and then it's dry during the summer. Then it's on the north side of the building. And so this is ferns and hostas, and it just looks like a beautiful jungle now that it's a little bit more mature. And this is one of the least um, thirsty places on campus. We matched it up with that slope going down with that north side of the buildings. We said, well, what can we put here? And originally we had a few plants that what I'd call just a plant that most people have in their yard, and it took more water. It wasn't the proper plant in the proper place. It wasn't the plant that wanted the shade. And so to try and keep them healthy, we kept even replacing the plants or over fertilizing or over watering, and we just couldn't get the right connection we needed. So then we came in, said, all right, well, this is what we have. Let's change our planting plan, and we put in the right plants, and boom, this one takes a little bit of irrigation in the summer and hardly anything else. You go down just the sidewalk from this one, probably 200 yards, and then we have a desert landscape. And it's on the west side of the building. It has sagebrush gardens, it has manzanitas, and it has all these plants that are low water landscapes. And so those we rarely water at all. Um, and what I want to emphasize with this one is you don't have to choose just like a desert friendly landscape. Landscapes, there's so many different plants that if you get the proper plant in the right place, you can have all kinds of landscapes. Believe it or not, but moss actually requires little water. It requires a shaded area. It requires a place where it can suck it up and kind of enjoy being moist. But if you tuck that on the north side of a house, close to concrete, and you give it a little bit of water or even just spray from the turf areas, then some of that moss will just grow and thrive. But the amount of water it needs constant moisture, but it needs very, very little moisture. And so there's a lot of plants that if you have them in the right place and you plant the proper plant in a park strip on the north side of a house, on the south side of the house, that's going to save you a lot of water by getting the right plant in the right place. So when you're doing landscapes, don't get stuck on thinking I need a low water plant. Start looking at the places first and determine how you want that place to look and look for plants that are going to do well in that area. So if it's a hot, dry area, yeah, the desert plants are we going to want. If it's a shaded area that's going to stay moist and water's not going to disappear too often, start looking at some of those fun shading plants that are going to be okay with even wet feet. And so you can still vary your landscape a lot just by making sure they're in the right place. Any questions about planting properly? Then we'll move back on. Now we'll talk about how to fix compaction. Because if there was a construction problem, then we're gonna have to fix it. So first, I'm going to show a couple things that happen when you actually have compaction. So this is a tree. This is probably a tree, and I had put a whole bunch in, and then I figured I'd wait for a question, so I took a whole bunch out. This is what we call stem girdling roots, and there's two things that cause it. A lot of times it's because we're planting the tree too deep, and then it's too compacted where the roots can't break out. And so when you plant a tree, you want to look at a couple things. You want to make sure that it's not already wrapping around and you can kind of straighten the roots out and mess with the roots a little bit to make sure they're pointed out and going the right direction. But if you get to the edge of that hole where you've dug your tree and it's a hard, compacted soil, then that tree is just going to continue to grow in a circle. The roots will hit it and they won't grow through it, they'll just grow around. And so a lot of times we'll see trees die when they're 40, 50, 100 years old because they've choked themselves out with their own root system, and it's because it's too compacted. And so this is just one of the issues, but making sure that soil's loose before you plant the tree or during planting the tree is going to help keep this kind of stuff from happening to the tree. This one is irrigation. So if you can see about right in the middle, that's a a sprinkler head, and this is just another sprinkler line that's cut through. This is a whole different property, about 150 miles away from the other one I showed you, but still a common practice. And you can tell by how green and beautiful the grass is where it's uncompacted that this soil is healthy and nice. It's beautiful, healthy, nice soil, but it was just so tight because they wanted it so smooth that as soon as the irrigation was turned off for an extended amount of time, everywhere else it browned out because it couldn't hold the water. And then everywhere else it stayed green where they had dug down, loosened it up, and they had loose soil. So mechanical aeration is one of the quickest and easiest ways to help release the turf. This is a kind of shows what it does is you have compacted soil, you get the shallow roots, thatch. A lot of people talk about thatch, you get a thatch layer. Once you do an aeration, you'll have this H2O that, or you, excuse me, have the water that gets in deeper. You'll have air particles getting deeper. And also, once you have air and water into the soils, all the nutrients and all those things will move faster and quicker through the soils and are taken up by the roots better. So not only does it loosen up so roots can grow better, but it also loosens it up so that everything in the soils can flow better. Salts will wash out a little quicker and easier if you have too much salt. Fertilizer or the nutrients that your grass need is more available. And the same concept for turf works for flowers, shrubs, and for trees. That if you have some air and soil, it allows everything to move better and it'll help your plants. These are just some cores, so we talk about what they look like. And then before I open up some questions, the pro tips. So it's one that I was going to talk about. Kind of this is in the professional world. This has been around for quite a while. One of the things I maintain are the sports turf, and so on the sports turf, I can on the sports turf, we've been doing this for several years to try and keep it mowed short and keep it holding water, but it's the wetting agents. And now this is something that I recommend because the cost has come down, they're more available, and this is something I recommend for even residential homes. And so this shows a soil on the north or on the left side and on the right side, and one that's untreated and one that's treated with a different type of wetting agent. And what a wetting agent does, there's two ways a wetting agent helps. There's one that's like, I would call it infiltration, where if you have soils that are hard or you have thatch and so the water's not going into your landscape, you can do one that's an infiltration that'll help draw the water into your soil. And then you have another kind that we call hydration, which is more like a sponge that'll hold the water in and kind of keep it available so that the plants can get down to and use it. And so this is another one. So here's a drop on your on the left hand side. You have a couple droplets of water on there, and then you kind of see how they work on the right hand side. The one that I call infiltration is kind of that little droplet that goes straight down. So infiltration is one, like I said, if you can use if you have high clay, or if you have a lot of thatch and so it's a little hydrophobic and the water won't go into it, then you can put some infiltration to go through. The ones that are better for hydration are going to kind of spread it out. It's going to go in and then it's going to spread out and it'll start moving um it'll start moving out through the soil and start getting where it needs to. It takes care of a lot of the dry spots and it takes care of a lot of the um and just keeps in the soil well. And one that I use is called Cascade, which is both. I use one that's about 10% infiltration and about 90% hydration. So it helps to get into the soil and stay there. So this is one of the practices 4 or 5 years ago we took from our sports field because it did cost a little bit of money. So we said, well, let's take this practice and let's use it all over our campus this year to see what we can do. And that's when we had a 40% savings between our aeration program and our changed our fertilizing program a bit and then put down our wetting agent that this ended up spreading it out and kind of helping us get water and hold water in the soil system, so we can reduce quite a bit of it. Um, and then just a couple quick videos. I've entered this one. This one, this is a video about our campus when we were prepping in the springtime for in our springtime for I'm going to reshare this one again just so I can bring it full screen. Hopefully that works. Maybe not. Maybe. All right. So this one, anyway, this is one we kind of prep for. And anyway, but I'm going to point out some things as it plays. Okay. So quick thing, like I said, is oh, there's no audio, huh? All right, well, I'm gonna have to point out. So what we're talking about, or what we just mentioned, is what they're showing us a lot of spring work. So, or fall work. A lot of times we always think a season ahead. So when we're thinking about water, planting in the fall helps them get the roots ready before they get to the summertime. And then Candace, is there any way that this can play for anybody else, or is it their own, or is it actually on my side that it's not playing the noise?
I'm not entirely sure. We got little bits of it, so I wonder if it's a loading issue. But what we can do is if you want to send me the video, we can add it to the YouTube video, and so folks can
Yeah.
watch it after the fact.
Okay, I'll send that one. I'm gonna hit play again. I'm gonna pause it just once or twice because I'm pointing out what they're doing if you can't hear it. Okay, so this is one. So right here, they're taking care. So trees and grass, we're talking about park strips, or we're talking about beds in general, is kind of our rules, and trees and grass do not go together. They complement each other well. We want grass in our landscapes, we want trees in our landscapes, but this is a tree well that we're cutting out we're cutting the grass out around the tree. So if we have a big tree, we're gonna have a big area without grass. We don't want them to compete. And so this is kind of one of those pro tips we're just watching is we spend a lot of time separating our grasses from our trees. So in park strips, especially, If you want trees or shrubs or plants, then by all means remove the grass. But even in your turf, I recommend cutting it out and giving some good space for your tree to get its own nutrients, its own water, not to compete with the grass. So that's what I pause and watch there. So then if you saw that, we kind of glanced over it, but mulching is good. We always say 3 to 4 inches is the magic number. That holds the moisture in, and it also prevents a lot of weeds. If we have less than 3 or 4 inches, we'll see a lot of weeds. But with 3 to 4 inches, it blocks out enough sunlight that it reduces them by quite a bit. All right, then I'm gonna skip. So one more thing, and this one I'll kind of glance through it fast. But one thing that we take a lot of pride in is mature trees. And so we're kind of doing the same thing as everybody else. We're trying to take care of some areas where we don't need the landscape or where we especially don't need turf. And then we are putting proper plants in. So this was actually kind of cool because we had a area that we pulled a tree out. So you probably hear this because we had a cool Metallica song to it, but it's like jumps around. But I'm gonna kind of skip into it. But this is kind of a fun project that we pulled this big tree out of our area so we could re-landscape it and put it in another spot. This shows the reason I want to show this video is this shows the depth of tree roots. So we're underneath all the tree roots of what you see here. And I think it's only about, I think we had about 18 to 20 inches on this one. So I think that's just a cool video. Is where I think you saw we pulled it out of a park strip. We put it in an area where we think the tree will stay, and then we did a lot less as far as that was a, kind of made that one a drought tolerant. We did a lot of stepables actually, so we could walk a lot on that park strip because it was in a parking lot. So we put a lot of water wise, low use times and things like that that people could walk across to their cars. And but we didn't want to lose any trees. We didn't want any turf there, so it was kind of fun just to move the tree. So my philosophy is trees are always the most important, at least the mature ones because they're old. Um, Beauty's next for me. So then I'm like flowers and then shrubs and then grass. Unless it's a plain grass, then I actually huge love of sports turf fields. So I got a couple questions and I can answer some of those, but keep them coming. The tree survived? Yes. We've actually moved many, many trees. So big mature, in fact, I think the mature trees that we move do better than the small ones. And so that tree is thriving. Our biggest one is we have about a 70-foot ginkgo biloba. There's about now it's about 90 years old, and so we moved that one. That one's doing good. What kind of mulch? We just use a basic bark mulch. Mulch, when you use mulch, this is a lot of kind of personal preference because rock mulch you don't have to replace, but you do have to clean it. Like you'll have to take a vacuum or wash it out or something like that eventually. Um, I like bark mulch because I do like it to break down and kind of feed the trees and the plants a little bit. Um, and then sometimes we have our own mulch. We recycle a lot of our food and our wood waste, and so we can have a rich organic mulch that we put down. But if it's for weed control and moisture control, it's more about just that 3 to 4 inches of depth. If it's about feeding the tree as well, then you probably want some kind of organic mulch. Grass, we did not when we cut out the grass, the tree roots, we might get a couple surface ones, but we don't do much on that one. Um, is clover under trees not good? Um, this is personal opinion. No, I don't want anything competing. There probably is an argument because clover does produce nitrogen, but it's the water's what I'm concerned about. I want the tree to be able to get all of its own nutrients, all of its own water, and so I don't want to have to compete for water when it's sucking it up. But um, that one can go. That one can go either way. Um, we can hear voices, just not the video. Sorry. Let's see. The manzanita, I can't remember what kind of manzanita, so I have to give. You can reach out to me and I can get you that one. Yeah, sorry, gallons per inches, and then the inches for the diameter of the tree. So if it's a 20-inch diameter tree, 20 gallons of water. If that kind of helps sum that up. Hydrotrain is a good wetting agent. Yes, it's kind of a mid-level. So to kind of give you an idea, I try not to talk too much about products because they're all good, but they all have different properties. Like the Revive is a common one you see, and Revive is more on that infiltration side, and Hydrotrain is on the more of the hydration side. So they actually act a little bit differently. Um, so let me get to mulch with grass clippings. Yes, grass clippings, if you put it too heavy and they're too wet, they'll get hot. So we'll heat up the root system. So you got to kind of put them down a thin layer, but they'll feed the tree well. They break down nice. They do a lot of good things. So you can use that as mulch, just as long as you're not too deep. The ferns, again, that's something you'd have to reach out to me. And my email is just my name. It's shane.richards@usu.edu. But if you want to send me this stuff, I can get you that information. I saw one. Over time, my lawn has become very uneven, difficult to walk and play on. Most of the time, the solution is aeration. Usually, when it starts to get clumped up, it's because it either has a bad clay soil underneath, a or it has too much thatch that's starting to build up. So best is to aerate it. You can even roll it, like rolling on top of the surface isn't bad, but gravity does the trick. So if the first aeration, you're not going to feel it, but if you start aerate 2, 3 times a year for that first year or two, you're going to pull out the soil chunks, and then the gravity is going to pull it down and kind of fill them in, and it'll spread it out and kind of even it out. So when I want to smooth out a turf lawn, I just say, let me aerate it a couple times this year, a couple times the next year, and then I can go back to one or two, and that'll do the trick. Let me see if there's one before that one. Good website. So Utah State University Extension, since their whole job is just to do that, you can go to Utah State University Extension and they'll have everything you want. They got thousands of different flyers and different things to assist with finding the right plants, finding drought tolerant, and all that kinds of stuff. So I usually recommend going there. Um, so dogs and plants, I usually tell people that dogs win. You got to choose if you want your landscape or the dog. They're tough to take care of. Most of the time, the urine's not going to be there. I mean, it'll kill grass easily. If it's a big mature tree, there's not going to be enough salt content to harm it. If it's a new tree and that's the place the dog has decided to, then you might need to put a fence around it and keep the dog away while the tree grows for a little bit. If it's an very tall ash tree, you probably want to worry about it. It'd be just fine. Um, I do grass clippings are just pretty much nitrogen and water. So even the fall, I would do it. Again, just don't do it too thick because it's generating a lot of heat as that breaks down and the microbes are working in it. So you don't want to go too heavy or too thick on the mulch unless you're creating a pile, causing it to get heat and then break down. So if you're putting it in a pile in the fall, letting it break down, and then taking the mulch in the springtime to be used, that'd be okay. But if you're going straight from grass to mulch, just make sure it's a thin layer so it doesn't get too hot. Um, oh yeah, so introducing water-wise grass, just overseed it. So the science, the grass is getting so good that what they're starting to do now is they're just better grasses, and so they'll actually overtake over time the Kentucky Blue you have in there. And so I just overseed it, maybe 5 to 6 pounds per thousand, and just do that every year. And pretty soon, within a couple of years, you'll have a whole new strand of grass, and it'll be more water wise. And especially if you start to cut your water back at the same time, if you're putting in a better water-wise turf and overseeding it in there, and then you cut your water back at the same time, that grass that does well without the water is going to overtake the Kentucky Blue and will beat it out. So that's actually a really good thing. An overseeding program is a great way to update that turf or update your grass and to actually get in a better grass system that takes less water. Um, Too late to aerate? Never. Aerate all year, anytime. Most people do in the spring and the fall. Our sports turf up on the campus, we aerate about 20, 25 times a year. So we aerate monthly, and then after practices and then after games, we aerate on campus. We do it monthly. So on campus, we start in April, and we aerate April, May, June, July, August, September, and October. So we'll aerate all the time. Soil sample. A good soil samples, you pull it from your yard. Utah State actually has a lab, the university. So if you call any extension agency, usually they'll give you an address and you can just put it in a baggie and send it up to Utah State University, and they will give you a full analysis of your soil. Um, and they'll tell you what you need. So if you tell them what it's for, if it's a garden or trees or that kind of stuff, and it looks like Candace already put the link on there for the soil test. All right, so landscape fabric, you're getting into my personal opinion. I hate, and so some people have different opinions, but I hate landscape fabric, mostly because it's just a barrier to start building up more soil for weeds. So it's always a good short-term solution, but I don't like it as a long-term solution. Um, so so that's my personal opinion on landscape fabric. All right, is there any I missed, Candace, while I was reading through those? Or
Yeah,
any others?
we had a couple come through in the Q&A box. This is a great question. Have you tried using any plant growth regulators specifically for turf management during drought?
Love them. So that one I put in the I didn't know how many pro tips to put in there, but yeah, so what the nice part about that one is it doesn't stop the direction, it doesn't stop the growth of the grass, it redirects it. So instead of getting a vertical growth on your grass, it'll actually go horizontal. It'll start to pop it out and thicken it up. So it will help with the water retention, it helps with color, and it also helps with only having to mow about every 10 days instead of usually in the spring and fall, you need to mow about every 4 days if you're trying to cut it at a healthy length and not cut off too much. So it helps a ton. So I actually use it pretty heavily, at least in the spring and the fall. Right now, we're putting it all over campus, and I'll do it again in September. Yes, and they are getting better and better. So I love using the growth regulators. So thanks for mentioning that. That's actually a really good thing. It doesn't quite help as much on water retention as a wetting agent does. But if you're aerating, you're using a wetting agent and you're putting down a growth regulator, you can be reducing your water usage on turf by probably 50% with those three items. And so it's those are three tools that you can use to really manage and keep it beautiful. Cut water down by 40, 50% and still have gorgeous green grass that you can play on and enjoy. So yeah, I highly recommend the growth regulators on it.
Wow.
You got to experiment or do a little research because some are more of a snake's oil and some are very, very good. So just kind of do a little research on them.
Are the wetting agents and the growth regulators, are those hard to find? Are they pretty common?
They're pretty common. Like I said, Revive is a wetting agent. Growth regulators, I don't know because I mean I buy them in bulk from my
Fair.
supplier, so I haven't looked at the stores, but they're becoming a lot more common. Wetting agents and growth regulators are starting to become a common thing. Um, so I think you should find them. Just don't quote me on it. The one that I
Cool.
use is called Governor G, which is a dry pellet one, so I put it on like fertilizer. And you get it in liquid, and it's great. It was kind of funny because I have just a quick story. I'll be fast because now I'll answer more questions. But
Yeah.
okay, I'll tell the story real quick. It'll be 1 minute. Is I had a I gave it we put it down on a piece of our property up here, Utah State, and I was experimenting with three or four of them. And I asked my turf supervisor. I kind of forgot that I put one on an area. I said, well, how did that work? And they said, oh, they said it sucks. They said it only worked for like 6 weeks. And I said, well, that's how long I wanted to last was 6 weeks. I mean, it was perfect. 6 weeks is what I was looking for. And anyway, so he said, not great 6 weeks. Anyway, it was made me laugh because it worked perfectly for 6 weeks. And so that's about what you get
That's
is 4 to
funny.
6 out of, but they're good.
We did have Stephen has a question about peat moss. What are your thoughts on using that in the lawn or around like bushes and trees for moisture
Mhm.
retention?
They'll work well. It'll break down eventually, so it doesn't last as long, but I like peat moss. It's probably a little more expensive. It compacts quicker in comparison to into mulch because mulch is going to stick around for a while, but there's nothing wrong with it. Peat moss will, and it looks nice. So if you like peat moss for the look, then that's one you can use.
Cool. There was a question that came through just about fertilizing turf. Like, what's your general for campus? What's your general schedule?
We do so fertilizing usually more is less, or again, or less is more. So we do it about 3 times a year, but we do use slowly release fertilizer. So we do one in the springtime that has a pre-emergent to stop weeds from developing, and then we do kind of a midsummer one, and then we do a fall one. If you're doing a quick release, then I would suggest, and it's a poundage. If you're doing quick release, do about 3/4 of a pound, maybe 4 to 5 times a year. If you're doing a slow release, do 1 pound of nitrogen to 1 1/4, 3 times a year. So that'll depend a lot on the fertilizer that you're purchasing.
Gotcha. Do you think that like the average homeowner, if the lawn doesn't get much traffic, do you think they need to fertilize that often? Or could they cut back?
Again, less is more, and I always recommend that somebody choose aeration over fertilizing. So I recommend that if somebody wants to, that we kind of saw that brown grass or that green grass, that if you're aerating your lawn, things can move through that soil so much better that you can actually cut down the fertilizer because we're a lot of times adjusting for the lack of movement in the soil, the lack of that nutrients being able to move around how it needs to. And so yes, if you're aerating good, use less fertilization, especially it does take more water when you fertilize to keep it healthy. So when you're a drought, I cut it back a little bit and I'd fertilize a little bit less and aerate a little bit more. Um, and that's kind of hard for people to get used to because fertilizer feels really good to put it down. Um, and so I always think of doing things 5 or 6. You can either do 5 applications of fertilizer per homeowner and one aeration. Or you could do 4 fertilizers and 2 aerations, or you can do 2 fertilizers and 4 aerations, kind of if that makes sense. Doesn't need to be exactly like that, but it just practice on doing something for your turf to make it nice. But less fertilization a lot of times is better. And it's hard. That's where you get professionals to help find that balance. But aerating helps quite a bit.
Cool.
Um, Aerating with the tree roots in the soil, not a big deal. Your tree roots will be deeper, and they won't get any harm from the aeration.
Great. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Really appreciate this presentation. This was super informative and awesome. This is being recorded. I'll send out a follow-up email to everybody and just kind of highlight some of the resources that were mentioned so you have them all in one spot. And we'll get you those videos with audio on that YouTube um, video. There is a survey that's going to I can't talk anymore. That's going to generate once you leave here. If you could give us a little feedback and let us know about future topics you'd like to see us host, that would be really helpful. Well, cool. Well, Shane, thank you so much for your time. We've got a lot of thanks and comments coming through on the chat box. This was awesome.
So thank you. You guys have a good day.
You too. We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.